Ed Stafford is truly the pinnacle of survival experts. Whether dropped in freezing snowfields or barren deserts, he can always manage to live comfortably, feasting on tender and juicy hedgehog stew, chewing sweet and vitamin-rich wild berries, living in a drafty shelter that's freezing in winter and scorching in summer, and finishing it off with a heartwarming and appetizing cup of hot tea. His life is practically like a paid vacation. In this episode, Ed Stafford takes on the challenge of Mongolia's Gobi Desert. The crew scavenged a battle-worn vehicle from a junkyard, and, with sparks flying and lightning flashing, marooned Ed in the heart of the Gobi Desert. Without using any survival tools, not even his hair, he must fend for himself here for the next 10 days. In desert survival, finding water is undoubtedly the top priority. Ed Stafford scans his surroundings, dismissing the endless plains in sight, and decides to head toward the mountains on the left. Mountains can create rain, and enough rain can form desert oases. Ed straps on his gear and sets off in his chosen direction. Scorching winds howl past him, accelerating his body's water loss. Ed urinates on the ground and judges from the pale color that he isn't severely dehydrated yet. After walking a few more steps, a plant known as wild donkey juice appears on camera. He knows Mongolians drink the juice from its leaves when lost in the wilderness. Following their example, he plucks a handful, squeezes hard, and drinks the slightly sour green liquid. This buys him a little more time in the desert. But to survive, he still needs to find real water soon. Along the way, his feet have been battered by sharp rocks and thorns. To keep going, he must make shoes, but there's no suitable material around. So Ed sacrifices the strap of his camera bag to fashion a crude pair. Though poorly made, they at least spare him from stepping on rocks and thorns. To find water faster, he begins climbing a 300-meter high peak. But to his disappointment, even from this height, the view remains barren. With night approaching, Ed decides to camp on the mountaintop. With no fire-starting materials nearby, he lies on the ground, enduring the cold through the night. The next morning, before the heat sets in, Ed packs up and resumes his search for water. After an unknown amount of time, upon conquering another peak, he spots a lush green valley below. The darker patches of vegetation are the most promising spots for water. However, as soon as he enters the valley, Ed notices a dangerous sign: scattered bones of a camel. This is Gobi bear territory, and he suspects the bear killed it. Considering how rare these bears are, Ed gathers his courage and ventures into the reeds to search for water, clanking the camel bones as he walks, to scare off any bears. As the ground grows damper beneath his feet, a small pool of water appears ahead. Without filtering or boiling, he drinks it straight. With the immediate water crisis solved, he grabs a handful of mud and smears it on his skin as sunscreen. Now, he needs to find a suitable campsite. Returning to the area outside the reeds, Ed finally sees what he least wanted: Gobi bear droppings, and a trail of their footprints. Aware of the danger, he moves farther away and searches for shelter on a nearby hill. He settles under a shaded spot. With time left in the day, he decides to tackle the fire-starting problem. Gathering dry wood for fuel and dead grass as tinder, he crafts a hand drill from a sharp stone. Ed begins methodically rubbing the drill, soon producing sparks that ignite the tinder, creating his dream fire. Tonight at least he won't freeze. On the third day, Ed sets out at dawn to forage. Originally, he only planned to hunt insects, but he stumbles upon a network of burrows with interconnected entrances. He deduces a colony of ground squirrels lives inside and decides to smoke them out. He blocks all but one entrance with rocks and builds a fire outside the remaining hole, hoping the smoke will suffocate them. After waiting for about an hour, Ed pokes a stick into the burrows, but as expected, finds nothing near any entrance. He figures the smoke didn't get inside because there was no wind to push it in. Next, Ed turns his attention to the camel bones, attempting to crack them open for marrow, but once again, he's disappointed. Left with no choice, he risks venturing back into the reeds to search for edible plants. Ed finds some licorice root grass, whose roots are edible. Without hesitation, he takes a bite. The flavor is intense, reminiscent of old-fashioned licorice root, and packed with natural sugars that provide plenty of calories. On his continued search for food, Ed Stafford spots an intact small tin can. After cleaning it thoroughly, it becomes a perfect cooking pot. Luck keeps coming his way. At the edge of the reeds, he finds a large patch of berries eaten by goby bears. Following the survival principle that, if a bear can eat it, so can I, Ed takes a cautious bite. When no signs of poisoning appear, he devours them without restraint, only stopping when the sun is high overhead. On his way back to camp, he fills the can with water, places it over the fire, and adds prepared licorice root and berries. After boiling for 3 minutes, a refreshing cup of hot tea is ready. Ed exclaims that life couldn't be better. After a few cups of tea, he plans to build a stone shelter. There are plenty of scattered rocks on the hillside, but with limited energy intake, he only completes a third of the structure by dusk. His body craves protein desperately, so the next morning, he decides to catch lizards basking under rocks. They barely move until warmed by the sun, making them easy targets. In one go, he catches 4, skewers them on a stick, and roasts them by the fire. After 15 minutes, lizard kebabs are ready. Facing his first protein source in days, Ed eats every last bit, even scraping the stick clean. But this meager meal is far from enough. He braves the scorching sun to search for more food, and luck strikes again. He notices movement under a rock and spots a hedgehog. With such protein delivered to his doorstep, he can't let it go. Ed ends its life with a stone. Having never cooked hedgehog before, he opts for the simplest method, an underground oven. He digs a pit, lines the bottom with stones, and builds a fire on top. Once the fire dies down, he places the hedgehog inside, covers it with wild donkey juice leaves to lock in moisture, and seals it with dirt. After 4 hours of waiting, Ed retrieves the hedgehog. Its spines now peel off easily, revealing more meat than expected. Perfectly tender, fragrant, and juicy. Ed declares it an absolute delicacy. Thanks to this protein-rich feast, the next few days pass smoothly. After 4 days of construction, his stone shelter is nearly complete. He designs the entrance at the back, leaves space for a fire on the left, and carves a hole in the front as a window. With strong winds today, he tries the smoke method again to catch ground squirrels. Near a dry riverbed, he finds a new burrow system, blocks all but the lowest entrance, and lights a fire outside. This time, the wind successfully funnels smoke inside. While waiting, he gathers firewood to finish his shelter. Piling logs over the structure, it actually looks decent from afar. Now, it's time to check the burrows. To his delight, he uncovers one hole and catches a squirrel, then a second, and a third, wiping out the entire family. He cooks them in the underground oven again. By dusk, he sits by his shelter, enjoying the meal. One bite, crispy, with a chicken-like taste, and packed with protein, far surpassing beef. He finishes with berries for dessert. Life keeps improving, and Ed feels he could stay longer. But when he wakes, it's already the final day. His carefully built stone shelter goes unused as he bids it farewell, successfully completing the challenge. This time, Ed truly outdid himself, starving for 9 out of 10 days, even resorting to eating tadpoles in desperation. But the final feast makes up for it. 4 charcoal-grilled trout, a stir-fried vegetable salad with ginger vinegar, and a bowl of strawberries and blueberries. At least he gets a protein-packed meal before heading home. This time, Ed Stafford arrives in Argentina's Patagonia, one of the last remaining great wildernesses on Earth. The crew scavenged an 18th-generation nuclear-powered stealth attack helicopter from a junkyard to drop him off at the challenge location. As the helicopter fades into the distance, he must quickly switch into survival mode. Ed Stafford suppresses the adrenaline surging through his body, forcing his mind to stay calm. Following his usual routine, he would prioritize finding water first. But here, water is the least of his concerns. Meltwater from the snow-capped mountains forms easily accessible streams, allowing him to drink freely. In this era, these waters remain completely unpolluted. Once night falls, Temperatures here plummet to near freezing. Building a shelter and starting a fire must be done quickly. The nearby woods make a good campsite. And while scouting, Ed makes an unexpected discovery: patches of clover growing on the ground. He doesn't want to miss any chance to replenish energy. Besides clover, there's also silverweed and wood sorrel, all edible raw, though he avoids eating too much at once, to prevent diarrhea from their oxalic acid content. Unfortunately, the area is swarming with annoying ants. Unable to tolerate the harassment, Ed abandons the woods as a campsite and moves to an open sandy patch instead. The soft sand makes a decent mattress, and nearby shrubs provide some windbreak. From the shrubs, he selects a long, dry branch for a hand drill, carves a fireboard with a stone, and uses vine fibers as tinder. To prevent strong winds from disrupting the process, he builds a stone windbreak behind the shrubs. After vigorous rubbing, until his hands bleed, sparks finally appear on the fireboard. Relieved, Ed gets his fire going before nightfall. As the sun sets, temperatures drop rapidly. On his first night, Ed can only sleep fitfully, huddled by the fire. The next morning, he finds frost on his backpack, proof that temperatures dipped below freezing overnight. But once the sun rises, the mercury climbs back to around 30 degrees Celsius. Ed plans to finish his shelter today. But first, he needs food. Spotting trout in the river, he wades in, attempting to catch them barehanded. With the right technique, trout enter a trance-like state when touched, allowing for an easy grab. But Ed has no prior experience in hand fishing. Though he knows the theory, it takes time to adjust. After 3 grueling hours, he still hasn't caught a single fish. To make matters worse, the thin ozone layer here makes sunlight brutally intense. His back gets severely sunburned. To continue the challenge, he reluctantly opens the crew's emergency supply drop, puts on the included shirt, and soothes his burning skin in the icy river. Now, back to business. Ed gathers logs, sets up 2 tripod-like frames, and spans a crossbeam between them. He then collects armfuls of unidentified grass and layers them at a 60-degree angle over the beam as roofing. A crude, barely functional lean-to is complete. That night, Ed finally gets proper sleep in his shelter. By the 3rd day, only one of the 4 survival priorities remains unresolved: food. Now he can focus entirely on it. Returning to the woods for resources, Ed finds a deer carcass. The flat shoulder blade can serve as a cooking surface, the antlers as digging tools, and the sinew from the leg bones can be made into strong cordage. For fishing, he hauls everything back to camp. Back at the river, Ed notices tadpoles swimming about. To others, they're just tadpoles. But to Ed, they're precious protein. He pops one into his mouth. Disgusting. Maybe roasting improves the taste? He scoops up 2 dozen, stuffing them into his pockets. At camp, he spreads the tadpoles on the deer scapula and roasts them by the fire. After 10 minutes, they're crispy outside, tender inside. Ed tries one eagerly, still revolting, but he forces himself to finish them. Protein is protein. Next, he soaks the deer leg bone in the river for hours to soften the sinew. Once pliable, he pounds it to separate the fibers, peels them strand by strand, and patiently braids them into cordage. Now he has fishing line. Golden thorns from plants serve as hooks. Flipping over a rotten log, he finds ant eggs for bait. With a grass stem as a fishing rod, Ed now has a complete makeshift fishing kit. He assumes the trout will bite easily, but after hours of waiting, not a single fish takes the bait. To make matters worse, a thick blanket of clouds moved in yesterday, bringing an abrupt end to the summer heat. Now, even in broad daylight, Ed Stafford is freezing cold, forcing him to frequently return to the fire to warm up while fishing. With no trout biting after hours of waiting, he braves the cold to search the grass for blueberries. Though small, they make up for it in flavor and abundance. Besides blueberries, he also finds a few wild strawberries. Unfortunately, these fruits still don't provide enough calories. Ed tries hand fishing again, but still comes up empty. Shivering, he just wants to hug the fire for warmth. The harsh conditions force Ed to think outside the box. He decides to build an automatic fishing trap. First, He plants a branch in the riverbed, then hooks a second branch onto it, attaching a line connected to a bent sapling on shore. A baited fishing line is tied to the mechanism. When a trout bites, it releases the hook, and the sapling yanks the fish out of the water. To increase his chances, Ed sets up 3 additional lines near the trap, hoping they'll bring him a proper meal. By the 9th day of the challenge, his efforts finally pay off. The trap is triggered, and 1 trout is caught. Another line also yields a fish. Encouraged, Ed attempts hand fishing for the 3rd time. This time, he applies lessons from past failures, keeping his hands ice cold, to avoid startling the trout with body heat, gently covering the fish before striking. Soon, he successfully catches his first trout. Though small, it's a monumental achievement. Holding the fish, Ed grins at the camera like a giddy 40-year-old kid. He builds a small rock enclosure in the river to keep the trout alive until dinner. Returning to the water, he lands an even bigger one. But when he adjusts the rocks to improve water flow, the fish immediately darts into the main channel. Ed curses himself for being an idiot. Retrieving the escaped trout proves far harder than expected. After an afternoon of chaos, turning the crystal-clear pool into a muddy mess, he finally recaptures all 4 fish. That evening, he roasts them thoroughly over the fire, serving them with a wood, sorrel, and clover salad, and a bowl of wild strawberries and blueberries. Without hesitation, he digs into the charred trout, crispy as expected, devouring every bit, skin and bones included. He can practically feel nutrients flooding his body. Afterward, he chews wood sorrel to cleanse his palate, and polishes off the berries for dessert. A satisfying meal, indeed. When sunlight returns to the valley, it's time to leave. Ed notices 6 new trout have wandered into his rock pool overnight. Now that he's mastered hand fishing, protein is guaranteed, meaning long-term survival here is possible. But as the helicopter arrives, the challenge officially ends. Once again, Ed Stafford proves why he's the hunger-enduring expert who survived the Amazon. For him, entering the wild is like coming home, feasting on sugar-rich, melt-in-your-mouth guavas, munching on piping-hot, juice-bursting Mexican redrump tarantulas, and trapping a 3-pound catfish, curled by the fire, savoring his catch. This is survival at its finest. This episode, Ed Stafford arrives in Guatemala's Sierra del La Condon Mountains. Before the challenge begins, he visits a local Mayan descendant shaman. The shaman tells him his ancestors welcome him into the jungle, but also issues a warning. If he doesn't launch a new survival show soon, he'll go completely bald. Ed's face darkens upon hearing this. After bidding farewell to the tactless shaman, the crew transports him deep into the jungle via nuclear-powered speedboat, dropping him off on a secluded sandbar. As the engine noise fades away, Ed officially switches to survival mode. Almost immediately, the jungle reveals its dangers. Ed spots a line of fresh jaguar prints on the sand, likely made that morning. He needs to leave this beach immediately. But when he surveys his surroundings properly, he realizes the boatman has tricked him. He's been left on an island surrounded by crocodile-infested waters. With no other choice, Ed bravely wades through the water. Fortunately, the crocodiles show no interest. After reaching the opposite shore unscathed, he gathers his gear and plunges into the dense jungle. Ed wants to find a campsite near both water and food sources, which proves more challenging than simply following a stream. He decides to climb a hill for better visibility. With 97% humidity in the jungle and endless winding trails, Ed is soon drenched in sweat. After 2 grueling hours, he finally spots daylight at the summit. Reaching the top reveals a stunning vista. A lake in the valley below would make a perfect campsite. However, Ed's excitement dims when he spots an enormous crocodile patrolling the waters. On the bright side, this indicates abundant fish stocks. Sticking to his plan, Ed begins descending toward the lagoon. Along the way, he finds a crystal-clear stream. Filtering and boiling would be a waste of time. Drinking straight from the source will only strengthen his iron stomach. Reaching the lake shore, Ed selects an open area with good visibility for his camp. He wants to build a shelter and make fire before nightfall. Nearby saplings provide excellent building material, while vines serve as natural rope. Ed plans to construct a simple lean-to shelter. Progress is slow with primitive tools. Just framing the structure takes 2 hours. Gathering enough palm fronds for roofing takes even longer. As darkness falls, the unfinished shelter forces Ed to spend his first night curled on the ground. Waking the next morning, Ed applies lessons from past survival experiences. Before continuing construction, he lays out collected firewood and tinder to dry in the sun. After completing the roof, he crafts a bow drill, using fibrous tree bark for cordage. Despite hours of effort, damp wood stubbornly refuses to produce sparks. When rain begins falling, Ed has no choice but to call it a day. By day 3, starvation forces Ed to pause fire-making efforts and search for food instead. The rainforest proves generous. Ed discovers a guava tree with numerous fallen fruits beneath it. He pops an overripe one into his mouth. Damn, no human intervention. And they're still this sweet. Ed eats so fast he barely has time for his usual narration. He collects several more for later. Further exploration yields another prize, a Mexican redrumped tarantula on the forest floor. Knowing locals consider these a delicacy, Ed won't pass up this protein opportunity. After dispatching the spider, Ed returns to camp and resumes fire-making efforts. The morning sun has sufficiently dried the wood. This time, friction produces precious sparks. Following the familiar routine, he soon has a roaring fire. First priority, roasting the tarantula. After 15 minutes, Ed tentatively bites a leg. Crunch. Definitely doesn't taste like chicken. After devouring all 8 legs, he turns to the plump abdomen. One bite releases a burst of warm fluid. Ed's strangled expression reveals exactly how it tastes. Now among the 4 essentials for survival, only a stable food source remains unresolved. Ed Stafford sets his sights on the fish in the lake, planning to build a raft for fishing. While searching the jungle for suitable logs, he notices an inconspicuous rodent burrow. The lack of vegetation around the entrance suggests there might be something inside. Ed sets up a snare trap at the burrow entrance. When selecting logs for the raft, he specifically looks for suspended deadwood. These contain less moisture and offer better buoyancy. After hauling a dozen logs to the lakeshore, Ed plans to construct a catamaran-style raft. He bundles 2 large clusters of logs with vines, then connects them horizontally. An old plank found in the jungle serves as the deck. By dusk, Ed finally completes his twin-hulled raft. Exhausted from the work, he soaks in a nearby pool, immediately feeling refreshed. Before full darkness falls, he checks the snare trap and surprisingly catches a rodent. The rat requires no preparation, just skewered on a stick and roasted by the fire. Ed finds the taste surprisingly good, consuming every bit, skin and bones included. The next morning, he still needs a spear before fishing. Ed somehow finds several sharp thorns and lashes them to a stick with bark fiber. Instant harpoon ready. During the maiden voyage, Ed remains uncertain about his creation. Fortunately, the raft doesn't immediately sink. Paddling to the lake's center, he raises his makeshift trident like Poseidon, but despite vigorous stabbing, comes up empty-handed. Realizing this method won't work, Ed collects more vines. Applying carpentry skills learned from Sum Jang the carpenter, he spends an entire day weaving a fish trap. Time flies. Suddenly, it's the challenge's final day. Ed uses a termite nest as bait, placing it inside the woven trap submerged in the lake. Soon, small fish swarm the trap, which Ed hopes will attract larger predators. The waiting proves agonizingly long. Only in late afternoon does a sizable fish approach. Spotting one entering the trap, Ed swiftly hauls it up, successfully capturing a large catfish. But cleaning the fish presents new challenges. Initially attempting to gut it with a thorn, the brittle spine snaps without piercing the tough skin. Ed even tries biting through, equally ineffective. Finally, he breaks off the catfish's own backbone and uses this bony weapon to slit the belly open. After removing the entrails, he gathers more guavas for dessert. The catfish roasts directly on the coals, and end of in Ed's dreamed of jungle protein feast materializes just before the challenge ends. The omega-rich catfish meat rapidly replenishes his energy. Finishing the entire fish, He feels his mental clarity returning. Having mastered survival skills for this jungle, Ed chooses to burn his raft and fish trap before leaving, a symbolic return to nature, of what nature provided. Thus concludes this episode's challenge,